It was on the frontier world of Xyphera, a place rarely spoken of in the more refined halls of the Galactic Assembly, that Special Ops Commander Adrian Wolfe found himself far from home. He had arrived amid the pastel skies and glowing forests of this distant planet on a reconnaissance mission, tasked with ensuring the region's stability before any further colonization efforts commenced. Little did he know, his actions here would forever transform his understanding of life, love, and destiny. The first weeks on Xyphera tested his endurance. The nights brought eerie winds that hummed between the crystalline spires of the forest, and the days unleashed simmering heat that baked the pink and violet sands in a constant shimmer. Adrian's only companions were the small group of soldiers under his command, seasoned in discipline, yet wary of the unknown. Occasionally, flickers of movement would catch their attention at the edge of the forest, but each time they advanced to investigate, the forms vanished among the luminous vines and ghostly blue trees. On the 27th day of their deployment, Adrian insisted on patrolling alone. The forest to the northwest had intrigued him for weeks. It pulsated with odd bioluminescence, and once, in a distant hollow, he thought he had heard singing, an otherworldly chorus that fluttered through the thick pink leaves. That day, he resolved to explore deeper, letting the curiosity of a soldier overshadow any caution that might have restrained him. He ventured out at dawn, a time when Xyphera's two suns spilled gentle lilac rays upon the land. After winding through a labyrinth of trees that spiraled toward the sky like twisted glass sculptures, he discovered the source of that curious singing. A shimmering clearing spread before him, its surface coated with crystalline vines that glowed in varying shades of turquoise and amber. Alien flora, large as his forearm, swayed with a slow, enchanting grace, exuding a gentle phosphorescent glow. Amidst all that beauty, lying still on a bed of luminescent moss, was an unconscious creature no taller than Adrian's hand. Her skin was tinted a gentle orchid hue. Tiny, pointed ears poked through strands of hair that glimmered with starlight, and her dress appeared woven from the silver threads of a spider's web. With the softest of breaths, Adrian knelt by this miniature figure. Despite her diminutive stature, he could see the delicate lines of fear etched on her face and the tattered edges of her attire, suggesting she had run through peril before collapsing here. He removed a canteen from his belt and carefully trickled a few drops of water onto the tiny alien girl's cracked lips. A tremor shuddered through her. Her eyes, large as the cosmos itself, fluttered open. The moment she caught sight of his towering form, she let out a quivering gasp. Her face blanched a paler hue, and her trembling grew so profound that Adrian worried she might hurt herself. She squeaked in a language unknown to him, a tumbling river of words, hurried and panicked. Despite the strangeness of her speech, he could guess its meaning: fear. "Easy," Adrian said, his voice gentler than he had used in a long time, for his own heart thundered with concern. "I'm not here to hurt you." He lifted his palms to show they were empty. "No weapon, no threat. I promise." Still, she cried out. In the next moment, a sparkle of light swam around the area. The luminous vines flickered more brightly, echoing her fear and pulses. She tried to scramble backward, but her exhaustion overwhelmed her. She collapsed again, arms up as if bracing for the final blow. He slid off one of his gloves, extended his bare hand slowly, and let the tips of his fingers rest on the moss a few inches from her feet. Slowly, with all the care he could muster, he said, "I will not harm you." Her trembling persisted, yet something in Adrian's voice, perhaps the honest warmth or the promise hidden within, calmed her for a fraction of a second. She peered up at him, still wide-eyed, but her posture no longer screamed panic. Fumbling for his translator device, Adrian pressed a button that initiated universal scanning, hoping to piece together fragments of her language from the outbursts he had just heard. After a few static bursts, the translator coughed up a phrase in halting, staccato tones. "Human, eat small." The words took Adrian by surprise, chilling him despite the warmth of the alien sun. He realized she must believe he intended to devour her. Gently, he said, No, I won't. My people don't eat other sentient beings. We don't devour smaller creatures." Through the translator, his reassurance took on a strange, garbled echo, but perhaps the meaning would be enough to soothe her. Her eyes flitted from his face to his hand, uncertain. Slowly, She nodded, but her small chest rose and fell in ragged movements. You not eat me? She squeaked through the translator, her voice so soft, it reminded him of a star's distant glimmer. No, Adrian repeated. Never. Time seemed suspended. The faint chirruping of alien insects filled the clearing. The swirling luminescence of the vines slowed, as though exhaling relief. The creature's arms lowered, her posture shifting from cowering to kneeling. She pressed a hand against her side, where her dress was torn, revealing a gash on her lilac skin. Even with her minuscule size, Adrian noticed the cut was not lethal, but it needed cleaning. He drew forth a first aid kit, carefully selected an antiseptic wipe, and glanced at the girl as if requesting permission. She nodded timidly, and he began to dab at the wound, mindful not to press too hard. She winced, biting her lip, but she allowed him to tend to her, though she looked ready to bolt at any false move. My name is Adrian, he said, tapping his chest. Adrian Wolfe. Friend. The translator's voice garbled out the name, but at least she might understand. She tilted her head, as though summoning courage from some hidden reservoir. She placed a tiny hand on her chest and said something that the translator managed to convert. I am Nyla. With introductions made, Adrian carefully lifted Nyla onto the palm of his hand, making sure she could steady herself by gripping the edge of his wrist. She was feather-light. Her lilac skin felt cooler than a human's, as if her body temperatures were lower in that petite frame. And though small and trembling, she radiated a flicker of energy that Adrian felt humming through his veins the moment he touched her. He gently carried her beneath the shady canopy of the forest, away from the more intense heat of midday. There, he set her down on a soft patch of glowing moss. He offered her a bit of water and some field rations, though how she could handle even a crumb of human food, he had no clue. She nibbled with extreme caution, taking minuscule bites, her expression curious at the taste. Where do you come from? He asked, unsure if the translator could handle a question that broad. But to his surprise, she seemed to understand. She tapped a silver pendant at her throat, shaped like two twisting leaves, then motioned around the forest. Near the heart of Xyphera, the translator said, small village, hidden. My people only survive in shadows of bigger ones. He remembered the fleeting movements his squad mates had seen at the edge of the forest. Could it be her people? They must be so easily frightened, and with good reason. They were no bigger than a toy figure from Earth, defenseless, in many ways, against the harshness of an uncaring universe. Nyla swallowed hard, then looked Adrian in the eye. The translator stuttered. We, rumored humans, big beasts, eat. Is that story false? You truly not eat us. He gave her a kind smile. Those stories are false, yes. My people do not eat yours, Nyla. You have nothing to fear from me. Even so, as they continued exchanging halting conversation, she often flinched at the slightest shift in his posture or the mildest noise from beyond the clearing. It would take time, he realized, for her to unlearn the terror embedded by whatever tales she had heard. When the day's heat ebbed, he considered bringing her back to camp, yet feared startling his hardened soldiers, who might react badly to an unfamiliar being. For now, he decided to remain out here with her, forging a quiet alliance, coaxing out more details of her life. As night settled on Xyphera, the forest twinkled in mesmerizing patterns, vines shimmering in subtle waves. He placed Nyla gently upon a broad mushroom-like growth that served as a cushioned seat. She gazed at him, curious but still wary. He pointed to the faint scars on her arms. How did you get hurt? He asked. She hesitated, eyes downcast, as though recalling something harrowing. Crystal beasts, she said through the translator, voice quivering with dread. They roam the northern forest. Large, jagged forms that tear and slash at all. This time they attacked. My people scattered. A swirl of pity and protectiveness stirred in Adrian's chest. He pictured monstrous creatures, possibly crystalline arthropods, rampaging through a vulnerable settlement of these tiny beings. Are they near your village now? Nyla nodded. Yes, they come in storms. Shatter huts, injure many. We hide, but too many. Adrian's soldier instincts flared. Part of him was certain that command would have mandated a recon request, an official mission briefing, but the rest of him, his sense of morality, could not turn away. Especially not after meeting this tiny being who so obviously needed help. If you'll guide me to your village, he said softly, I'll do whatever I can to help. Even as relief glimmered in her gaze, it mingled with despair. You alone. How fight them? The translator echoed. They are many. He gave a small, reassuring grin. I'm not alone, he replied. I have friends, my squad. We have resources, technology. We can defend your people. He made sure each word carried conviction. And for the first time, she did not flinch. Instead, she gazed at him with something akin to awe, as if the notion of a giant harnessing technology to help her kind was unimaginable. Night deepened, painting the forest in midnight and silver. Tiny spores danced in the beams of the smaller moon. Adrian stayed awake, watchful, while Nyla slept in fits, still trembling from trauma. Now and then, he touched the translator, ensuring it functioned, reminding himself that bridging their languages was the first step in bridging their worlds. When dawn broke, Nyla guided Adrian through the forest along a narrow trail, nearly invisible to human eyes. Sharp, glimmering rock outcroppings stood like the bones of the planet. In the distance, two waterfalls spilled across luminous stones, creating swirling pools of turquoise water. Flowers, twisted like ribbons of pastel light, unfurled to greet the twin suns. The deeper they moved, the more alive everything felt, as though the forest itself pulsed with an unspoken heartbeat. Adrian noticed how even the smallest creatures, winged insects that glowed pink and gold, lizard-like animals with crystalline scales, seemed to ripple in time with some cosmic hum. Finally, they arrived at Nyla's village, though calling it a village by human standards might be a stretch. What Adrian saw was a cluster of miniature dwellings carved into the sides of large, bioluminescent mushrooms and the hollows of old, broad trees. Each home was no bigger than a human shoebox. It was as if an entire civilization had been scaled down and hidden among the forest's roots. Dozens of Nyla's kin peeked out, alarmed by Adrian's colossal presence. Some squeaked warnings or threw small rocks that bounced harmlessly off his boots. Nyla raised her hands, calling out in a reassuring tone, explaining how this human was a friend, not an enemy. Gradually, the bravest among them stepped forward, tiny torches raised to peer at him. Adrian knelt, adopting his gentlest demeanor. I am Adrian Wolfe, he said into the translator, voice calm. I come to help you fight the crystal beasts. A chorus of hushed voices swept the crowd. Although fear lingered in their eyes, flickers of hope emerged. A pair of elder aliens, their hair draped in shimmering ribbons, approached. Through hurried conversation with Nyla, they introduced themselves as key leaders, Keeper Haros and Keeper Lysai. They bowed courteously to Adrian, and he returned the gesture with the same solemn respect. You claim you can help, Keeper Haros said through the translator. But the beasts come in large packs, vicious and unrelenting. Our weapons do nothing to their diamond-like hides. We must hide, run, or be destroyed. Adrian nodded, thinking of the advanced gear his squad possessed. Even if they had come here for a different mission, technology was technology. We have weapons that can pierce steel, he replied. We'll fight the beasts off, but I'll need my team. Let me return to my camp. We'll come here prepared. The elders exchanged uncertain glances. Lysai asked, Do you vow not to harm us? Nyla's expression pleaded for them to trust Adrian. He placed a hand over his heart. I vow I will not harm you or your people. Let me help. Very well, Haros conceded. We will await your return. But be swift. We sense another attack will not be far off. Adrian made his way back to his squad's outpost around midday. Even from a distance, he heard the hum of their perimeter sensors and the occasional static-laced radio transmissions. A swirl of conflicting emotions roiled within him. The excitement of bridging two species, the worry that his men might react with fear or derision, and the hope that they could truly protect Nyla's fragile community. After crossing the final ridge, he spotted his second-in-command, Lieutenant Camila Reyes, scanning the horizon with binoculars. She spun around at his arrival, relief etched on her face. Commander, she exclaimed. We thought something had happened. You've been gone for 2 nights. Situation's complicated, Adrian said. Gather everyone in the briefing tent. Within a half hour, he stood before his squad of 8, their expressions shifting from exasperation to curiosity as he recounted his discovery. He told them about Nyla, about her diminutive race, and the rumored crystal beasts. Some raised eyebrows skeptically. Others wore faint smiles at the notion of knee-high aliens in dire peril. When Adrian finished, Camila nodded. "Commander, I trust your instincts. But are we sure it's wise to intervene? Our mission was strictly recon, to see if the region was stable for further colonization." "That was the official mission," Adrian agreed. "But we can't ignore people in danger just because it's not in a directive. This planet is not just empty wilderness. There's a sentient civilization here, threatened by savage creatures. We have the means to help." "We do," said Sergeant Holcomb, their weapons specialist. "But the question is, how do we do it without terrifying them or squashing them?" A half-laugh rippled around the tent, but Adrian was already formulating a plan. "We must be respectful of their size. Keep your distance, approach slowly, and let me do the talking. Our translator can handle their language. Maybe not perfectly, but enough. Most importantly, treat them as allies, not curiosities." He outlined a strategy for driving off the crystal beasts, a combination of sonic pulses to disorient them and targeted energy blasts to shatter their crystalline hides. Using the squad's advanced detection gear, they could guard Nyla's village and ambush any incoming threat. The plan, though direct, required caution. Nobody knew the beast's full capabilities. That afternoon, Adrian led his squad back through the forest, which glowed brighter in the building tension of impending confrontation. Upon arriving at the village outskirts, the group halted. Carefully, Adrian hailed the elders. As dozens of wide-eyed aliens poked their heads out of their dwellings, the human soldiers assembled in a slow, precise formation. They kept their weapons pointed down, showing no threat. Camila handed Adrian a small container of medical supplies and ration packs, which he offered as a gesture of goodwill. Keeper Haros and Keeper Lysai approached, flanked by a row of smaller villagers. Nyla hurried forward, relief shining in her eyes. With a practiced calm, Adrian introduced each of his squad mates via the translator. Though the villagers trembled at the towering figures dressed in black and gray armor, they could see the sincerity in their gestures. Nyla watched with a sense of wonder. "So many of you," she said to Adrian, voice quivering with both intimidation and gratitude. "Thank you for not abandoning us." He managed a gentle smile. "We'll do our best to keep you safe, Nyla." With the alliance established, the humans erected a perimeter of sensor beacons around the village's outskirts. The devices emitted a subsonic hum designed to alert them at any sign of incoming threat. Meanwhile, Holcomb tested the sonic disruptors that would jam the beast's coordination. If the creatures attacked en masse, the disruptors might buy enough time to target them with energy rifles. Sunset approached, bathing the luminescent forest in a deep lavender hue. After finalizing the perimeter, Adrian and his squad settled in among the bioluminescent growths, forming a protective ring around the miniature dwellings. Human rations were shared in small bits with the villagers, who found the taste peculiar yet strangely exciting. The mood felt surreal. Giants and tiny folk united under the swirling lights of an alien dusk, each watching the other in silent curiosity. Nyla guided Adrian aside. She led him to a subtle clearing behind the largest mushroom dwelling, where a cluster of luminous stones circled what appeared to be a shrine. At the center stood a small statue carved from shimmering mineral, depicting a figure with outstretched arms, as if welcoming the night sky. "We call this the Heart of Xyphera," Nyla explained through the translator. "Legend says a great spirit once protected us. If we could awaken that spirit, no beast would trouble us. But we do not know how." Adrian studied the statue. It was about 2 feet tall, still dwarfing Nyla's height, and carved with intricate symbols that he couldn't decipher. He ran his hand along the polished surface. Curiously, a faint warmth tingled in his fingertips, reminding him of the fleeting pulse he felt when he first lifted Nyla in his hand. "There's energy here," he muttered. "Some kind of resonant power?" Nyla nodded, her eyes reflecting the statue's glow. "We believe the entire forest is alive with this energy. My people can feel it, faintly. Perhaps your arrival is not by chance," she added softly, eyes drifting to his. Maybe the forest's heartbeat guided us together. He was unsure how to respond. He had never considered himself a mystical man. Yet the hum beneath his skin told him something extraordinary was at work. That night, as the watch rotation commenced, quiet fell over the village. The only sounds were the gentle pings of the sensor beacons and the hushed conversation of the humans adjusting to the bizarre beauty around them. Occasionally, one of Nyla's people would drift by, eyes glowing with trust and curiosity, offering delicate woven shawls or small beads as tokens of appreciation. Around midnight, an alarm erupted from the southwestern sensor. High-pitched wails soared through the trees. The ground trembled. Emerging from the darkness, outlined by flickering starlight, a pack of shapes approached, spines glinting, limbs reflecting the forest's glow. A hiss of warning passed through the human lines. Positions, Adrian barked. In unison, the soldiers aimed their rifles, and Holcomb primed the sonic disruptors. The creatures charged into the clearing. They stood roughly the size of large dogs, but their bodies were formed of transparent crystal segments, each joint shimmering with internal light. Wicked, razor-sharp limbs extended like scythes. The biggest one, likely the alpha, reared up, letting out a shrill cry that resonated among the mushrooms. At Adrian's command, Holcomb activated the sonic disruptors. The devices emitted a forceful pulsed wave that rattled the beasts. Their crystalline hides vibrated, causing them to skitter, momentarily disoriented. Taking advantage, the squad opened fire with pulses of concentrated energy. Beams pierced the beasts' crystal armor, fracturing them from within. Sparks of azure light erupted where the blasts found their mark, sending shards scattering across the glowing moss. Several of the creatures screeched, stumbling as more concentrated fire from Camila and the others found lethal vulnerabilities. The Alpha roared in defiance, launching itself forward. Adrian locked onto it, squeezed the trigger, and delivered a powerful bolt that disintegrated half the beast's chest. Shards of crystal rained down. With an echoing shriek, the Alpha collapsed into glimmering fragments. In moments, a mere handful of the beasts remained. They scrambled to retreat back into the dark forest, dragging their wounded. The path behind them was littered with glittering remnants of their brethren. Adrian's heart pounded as he scanned for further movement. When the last scuttling shapes vanished among the glowing vines, the sensor beacons returned to a calm, periodic beep. A cheer rose among the humans, and a wave of exultation spread through the tiny villagers, who emerged from hiding spots, trembling with astonished relief. In all their memory, never before had the crystal beasts been driven away in such fashion, let alone decimated so swiftly. Nyla rushed to Adrian's side, nearly stumbling in her excitement. Amazing. We never seen them fall. Her voice wavered between tears and joy. She looked up at him, awe dancing in those large, lilac eyes. Thank you, all of you. The elders stepped forward, bowing deeply. Haros clasped his hands. We are in your debt, Commander Adrian Wolfe. Your people have performed a miracle this night. Yet even in victory, Adrian's soldier instincts flared with concern. They might return, he said, voice low. We need to set a permanent perimeter, maybe station some of us here if we want long-term peace. The elders glanced at one another. Lysai's face clouded with renewed worry. The beasts often regroup quickly, but perhaps your weapons, you can hold them at bay. In the euphoria of triumph, none noticed that the swirling lights of the forest had grown more intense, dancing in vivid patterns above them. Except Nyla. She gazed at the glowing canopy, a flicker of unease crossing her features. For a fleeting second, she felt something in her chest, a surge of that energy, like a whisper of wind. But the moment passed, overshadowed by the relief of survival. Over the following days, Adrian and his squad established a protective boundary. They helped fortify the village, small pitfalls scaled to the beast's size, a ring of sensor beacons to provide early warning, and a ready stockpile of energy rifles rigged to automatically fire upon incoming threats. Although the village remained dwarfed by the giant visitors, the two peoples found a peculiar sense of camaraderie. One morning, children from the village gathered around Camila, giggling as she displayed a hollow projection of Earth's animals. Their tiny voices squealed with delight at images of colorful fish and majestic birds. Meanwhile, Sergeant Holcomb taught older villagers how to activate and aim miniature versions of the disruptors, though the recoil was still too powerful for them to handle without assistance. It was a fragile but inspiring picture of two worlds blending. Each night, the shimmering forest lulled humans and aliens to rest in relative harmony. All the while, Adrian found himself drawn closer to Nyla. Their conversations, halting at first, began to flow more seamlessly as the translator absorbed more of her vocabulary and intonations. She asked him about his home, about Earth's oceans, Earth's deserts, Earth's skies. He, in turn, learned of her people's customs. Intricate dances held beneath the full glow of Xyphera's twin moons, rituals honoring the forest's silent spirit, lullabies in a lilting language that sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. He realized that whenever he drew near, she no longer shook with fear. Instead, a curious warmth lit her eyes, as though she felt safe in his presence. And though he never imagined falling for someone so different, an ache formed in his chest whenever he glimpsed her delicate smile, or heard her laugh, or saw her stoic bravery in the face of danger. The notion of love, truly, deeply, between them was uncharted territory, but his heart was drawn ever closer, as though responding to an invisible tether. Rumors circulated that the crystal beasts were regrouping deeper in the forest. The sensor beacons sometimes detected roving packs, yet no major attacks had come close since that first confrontation. Tension lingered. Adrian often found himself waking in the middle of the night, drawn to the shrine behind the village. He would see Nyla there, seated on a smooth stone, gazing at the statue of the heart of Xyphera. She would turn at his approach, a wistful look in her eyes. "Thank you for what you've done," she'd say. "My people have never known such safety. But I'm worried. We have lived in fear for so long. I doubt peace is as simple as an array of machines." Adrian would sit beside her. "I know. We'll do what we can, but," he would glance at the forest glow, "I sense something deeper at work here. Some energy I can't explain." She nodded, placing a hand on the statue's base. "The stories say the forest chooses a champion when the land is most in need. I wish I knew how to awaken that champion." He covered her hand with his own, marveling at how her entire palm fit easily within the breadth of two of his fingers. Yet the warmth he felt was undeniable, coursing through him with renewed strength. In that moment, he realized that this something deeper might be not just the forest's energy, but the bond growing between them. Over time, the forest's glow became more erratic. Flashes of violet and turquoise dashed through the canopy at odd intervals. Strange pulses of luminescence spread across the moss, sometimes illuminating the entire village in bursts of surreal brightness. Elders whispered that the planet's spirit was stirring, that the heart of Xyphera was awakening from centuries of slumber. Then, one midday, a sensor beacon erupted with frantic warning signals. An entire horde of crystal beasts was approaching from the north. This time, there were easily 3 times as many as in the first attack. Their skittering forms advanced in a relentless wave, churning the pink sands as they barreled forward. Adrian and his squad hurried to the perimeter, rifles at the ready, disruptors humming. The villagers hid in their dwellings, but many peered out, hearts pounding with dread. Under normal circumstances, Adrian's force could handle a good number of the beasts, but these were overwhelming odds. They unleashed the sonic disruptors, staggering the front ranks. Holcomb and the others poured fire at the swarm, fracturing crystalline shells, scattering shards that sparkled like shattered ice under the intense glare. But as soon as one line of beasts fell, more rushed in from behind. The ground trembled with the combined weight of their charge. Sweat beaded on Adrian's brow. He barked for a fallback, urging his squad to form a tighter defensive circle. Despite the advanced weaponry, the sheer numbers were frightening. The beasts crept closer, eyes glowing with a menacing blue. A monstrous alpha, larger than any previously seen, glistened with multi-hued crystals that seemed impervious to the energy bolts. It roared with an almost harmonic resonance, commanding its pack. Sensing dire peril, many villagers fled toward the heart of the forest, seeking cover amidst the twisting vines. Nyla, trembling but determined, refused to retreat without Adrian. She lingered behind a broken tree root, watching the confrontation unfold in horror. Every blast, every swirling cascade of shattered crystal, made her heart pound. Yet the beasts would not stop. The alpha advanced, slashing aside smaller obstacles, aiming directly for Adrian and his squad. Another volley of energy shots hammered it, but the blasts barely left cracks in its armor. Camila cursed under her breath as her rifle overheated. The circle shrank further. If the alpha broke through, the rest of the beasts would tear the humans and the village apart. Adrian lunged forward, launching a concentrated bolt into the Alpha's center mass. The impact sent it reeling, but it did not fall. With a murderous shriek, it lashed out, fracturing the disruptors at the perimeter, effectively neutralizing their greatest advantage. Dozens more beasts flooded in. And then came the moment that changed everything. From behind the village huts, Nyla darted out, fear etched into every fiber of her being, yet propelled by desperate resolve. She ran directly to Adrian's side, as though she might guard him with her tiny body. He noticed her too late to stop her, but he reached for her in alarm. "Nyla," he shouted. The Alpha's many-faceted gaze flicked toward her. A ferocious wave of energy crackled across its crystal hide. It lashed forward, eager to crush the little alien who dared defy it. Suddenly, the forest's glow intensified to blinding brilliance. The statue of the heart of Xyphera, visible even from this distance, emitted a piercing beam of light that seared the sky. An electric hum filled the air, a cacophony of chimes echoing across the trees. Adrian and his squad staggered, shielding their eyes, as the entire clearing became awash in radiant energy. A storm of light descended upon Nyla and Adrian. He felt an indescribable surge, as if the planet itself poured raw power into their bodies. Nyla cried out, but her voice was drowned in the resonance. For a heartbeat, Adrian could not see, hear, or move. He existed in a kaleidoscope of swirling luminescence. Then, the light receded. In its wake, the crystal beasts halted, confused. The Alpha, just inches from delivering a lethal blow, snarled. But something had changed. Nyla was no longer the size of Adrian's hand. She now stood as tall as he was, wreathed in shimmering, vine-like energy that danced around her arms and torso. Her orchid skin glowed with an otherworldly brilliance, and her hair, still sparkling with star-like flecks, flowed down her back. She appeared part of the forest's essence, imbued with ancient might. Adrian stared in disbelief, and perhaps a flicker of wonder. "Nyla," he whispered. She met his gaze, her lilac eyes now filled with both amazement and fierce resolve. She did not speak, but raised her arms and unleashed a torrent of vibrant power that burst from her hands, striking the Alpha squarely. The creature howled as fractals of light splintered its crystal hide. The energy ripped through the Alpha's core, shattering it in a dazzling explosion that reduced its body to glittering dust. The rest of the beasts, momentarily stunned, squealed in panic. Some turned to flee, while others continued to fight, hurling themselves at the humans. But Nyla, with Adrian by her side, advanced. She radiated power that lanced through the horde, fracturing them one by one, forcing the survivors to retreat. The humans rallied, firing expertly, picking off stragglers. Bit by bit, the crystal beasts dissolved under the combined onslaught of conventional weaponry and raw planetary magic. When at last the creatures fled, the clearing was littered with shards that sparkled in the starlight. Slowly, the sensor beacons resumed their steady beep. Everyone stood in stunned silence, gazing at Nyla, who now towered like a human among her previously pint-sized kin. She blinked, swaying on her feet, uncertain of the transformation's permanence. Adrian caught her as she teetered, his strong arms encircling her waist. He could hardly breathe. "Are you all right?" Her voice trembled, sounding the same, but fuller in volume. I think so. The heart of Xyphera. It answered our need." She glanced over the battlefield, then down at her new form, shaking with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "Adrian, Words failed her. And so he just held her close, forgetting the war zone, forgetting protocol, letting the moment of triumph wash over them like a tide of starlight. Reverently, the elders approached. Their eyes shone with adoration as they bowed before Nyla's newly empowered form. The forest glimmered in gentle applause, as if the planet itself approved. She stepped away from Adrian's embrace, her expression a blend of humility and astonishment. The translator crackled with the elders' voices. "Nyla, the champion of our legends. You have awakened the spirit. May you guide us as we rebuild." Though overwhelmed, Nyla nodded. "I will do my best." The humans took a moment to gather themselves. Holcomb rubbed the back of his neck, eyebrows raised in disbelief. Camila exhaled a shaky laugh. "Commander, We sure picked a wild planet to scout. Adrian managed a soft chuckle. I'd say, let's make sure everything is secure. Then we debrief. The squad spread out, searching for wounded among the villagers. A few had been injured in the chaos, but with advanced medical kits, the humans and Nyla's people worked together to tend the fallen. It was a scene of extraordinary unity, bridging gaps of size and origin with an ease that felt almost fated. In the following days, the forest seemed to settle into a profound calm, as though exhaling relief after centuries of strife. The crystal beasts had vanished into the deeper wilderness, and scouts reported no signs of large packs. The barrier of technology remained, but all understood that it was only part of the solution. Far more pivotal was the awakened power that coursed through Nyla, the champion, the conduit of Xyphera's spirit. In her presence, the forest glowed with renewed vitality. Meanwhile, Nyla's life changed irrevocably. Her newfound height allowed her to walk side by side with Adrian, to meet his gaze without craning her neck. She was still lighter than a human woman of similar stature, her bones seemingly laced with the same bioluminescent energy that illuminated the forest. She found her steps unsteady at first, often grasping Adrian's arm for balance. The villagers marveled at her. Some even wept with joy, convinced the old tales were true, that a champion would rise when the planet faced dire peril, forging alliances that would save them all. And though her people still revered her, she remained Nyla, kind-hearted and soft-spoken, astounded by the breadth of possibility laid before her. And with each passing sunset, she grew closer to Adrian. Their small conversations near the statue blossomed into heartfelt confessions. She asked about the intricacies of human society. He recounted stories of Earth, the traditions he loved, the family he left behind. She told him of the ancient dances, the shimmering nights of her childhood, the dreams she once held of venturing beyond her tiny world. What began as a quiet spark, nurtured by empathy and gratitude, soon flared into a passion neither of them could deny. Adrian found himself lingering in her presence whenever possible, drawn by a gravitational pull stronger than any worldly force. Nyla discovered that even as she gained new strength and height, her heart yearned for the gentle soul who had knelt in the moss beside her, promising he would not eat her, but protect her. Thus was their romance born, an unlikely union between a special ops commander from Earth and a once tiny alien champion. The villagers, though still adjusting to the idea, celebrated it. They wove garlands of luminescent flowers to hang around Adrian's neck, composing songs of gratitude for the day when man and champion met in the shining forest. News of these developments eventually reached the ears of Galactic Command. Recon drones that soared overhead transmitted glimpses of the Alliance. Official orders soon arrived. Adrian's squad was to maintain a secure post on Xyphera until further notice. Scientists and diplomats would come to study this new culture to see if a broader partnership was viable. In a makeshift command center near the outskirts of the village, Adrian read the official communiques with mixed emotions. He was relieved that the possibility of forcibly colonizing Xyphera was being reconsidered. Perhaps Command had realized the planet was not an empty frontier, but a vibrant civilization deserving respect. Yet he also sensed the potential for complications. Diplomats meant bureaucracy, research teams meant prying into secrets that Nyla's people might prefer remain sacred. "What are you thinking?" Nyla asked, stepping up behind him. She placed a glowing hand on his shoulder. They had grown so accustomed to each other's company that her presence felt like an extension of his own. He set aside the datapad. "We've done good here," he said, lacing his fingers with hers. "But I worry about what happens next. The galaxy can be an unforgiving place. Politicians, corporate interests, they might see your people as obstacles or resources to exploit." Nyla's gaze flickered with concern. "But you'll stand with us, right?" He met her eyes. "Always. Your cause is mine now." A tender smile graced her lips. "Then we face the future together." As more days passed, the synergy between the humans and Nyla's people bore fruit. The combined efforts made the village flourish. Injured residents returned to health. The once scrappy huts saw structural improvements courtesy of the humans' engineering knowledge, scaled carefully so as not to overshadow or destroy the village's organic aesthetic. And the forest seemed to welcome these efforts. glowing in harmonious patterns that matched the villagers' whispered songs of gratitude. But a subtle tension lay beneath the surface, driven by the knowledge that soon, official envoys would arrive. Adrian spent hours conferring with the elders, explaining the nature of galactic politics, cautioning them that not all humans were as friendly as he and his squad. Keeper Haros and Keeper Lysai maintained hope that any new arrivals would see reason and treat them fairly, especially with Nyla's champion status secured. Still, the unknown weighed heavily on everyone's minds. One evening, as the lavender suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in swirling shades of plum, Adrian found Nyla alone by the heart of Xyphera's statue. She stood tall, radiant in the soft moonlight, a silent sentinel as she contemplated the cosmic energy that had forever changed her destiny. Approaching quietly, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "You feel it too, don't you?" She nodded, gaze never leaving the statue. "Yes, a current, a pulsing in the air. It grows stronger. It's as if the planet is forging a deeper connection with us. I worry about the day outsiders arrive. The spirit is not something to be studied by scalpel and microscope, or sold." Adrian's chest tightened. "I'll do everything I can to protect your people, and Xyphera, but I can't promise how the rest of the galaxy will act." Her shoulders sagged, but then she turned, lifting a hand to gently touch his cheek. "You've already done so much," she whispered, "and you've won my heart in the process." His breath caught. Time seemed to slow. In a single fluid motion, he dipped his head toward hers, and their lips met in a gentle, luminous kiss beneath the twin moons. The swirl of energy around them pulsed in glowing threads, as though the forest itself rejoiced in their union. A few weeks later, a small diplomatic vessel landed at the outskirts of Adrian's encampment. It bore the emblem of the Galactic Assembly, indicating a team of envoys and researchers. The arrival caused a stir among the villagers, who peered cautiously from behind luminous mushrooms and vines. Adrian greeted the newcomers, two diplomats in formal attire, accompanied by a science team of 3 humans, each brandishing scanning equipment. It was a polite but tense meeting. The diplomats expressed interest in building a positive relationship with the local inhabitants, but as soon as they glimpsed Nyla's new form, their curiosity flared. "Fascinating," one researcher murmured, adjusting her scanning device. "A morphological change triggered by unknown planetary energies. Commander Wolfe, we must request an in-depth examination of Ms. Nyla to understand." "You will request permission," Adrian interrupted calmly but firmly, "and respect it if she says no." The envoy frowned. "Of course, we merely want to understand for the sake of science." Nyla stood behind Adrian, shoulders squared. She surveyed the new arrivals with polite caution. Although she understood their words through the translator, she made it clear that any testing would happen only if the elders consented and if it did not disturb the planet's sanctity. Over the next few days, the research team roamed carefully, mapping the forest, collecting samples. Diplomats attempted to speak with the elders about trade agreements or resource sharing. Haros and Lysai remained gracious but non-committal, wanting to preserve their way of life without ceding control to outsiders. During one such diplomatic session, in which Camila and Adrian accompanied the officials to the village, the forest's glow abruptly shifted. A rolling thunder swept the skies, and the ground quaked, almost toppling everyone off their feet. Alarm rang through the village. From the northern horizon rose plumes of dust, laced with brilliant sparkles of light. A swirl of panic gripped the villagers. Adrian's heart dropped. The crystal beasts again. A trembling scout arrived, panting. "Commander, elders, something is happening. We saw the beasts, thousands of them. They move like an endless tide. Their alpha is huge." Nyla clenched her fists, a surge of energy flickering in her eyes. "We have to stop them." The diplomats blanched. "Commander Wolfe, we can't risk the safety of the research team. Evacuate us immediately." Adrian's jaw tightened. "We're not leaving. This village stands, and we'll stand with it." The elder keepers nodded gravely. "We will protect our home. If you must retreat, so be it. But we remain." A swirl of conflicting priorities exploded in that moment. The humans had never seen a threat of such magnitude, but abandoning the village to slaughter was unthinkable. Adrian felt the weight of command pressing on him. He summoned his squad, readied the perimeter. Nyla prepared to channel the forest's power. Even the villagers armed themselves with the modified disruptors. All too soon, the horizon darkened with a shimmering wave of crystal forms. Perhaps the entire species rallied under a monstrous alpha that towered like a living fortress of diamond. "Hold the line," Adrian shouted. "We do not yield." Blasts erupted as the beasts swarmed the perimeter. The alpha roared, fracturing the air with a sonic resonance that cracked the ground. Automated turrets fired at the throng, energy bolts shattering dozens of beasts, but hundreds more advanced, unstoppable. Humans and villagers fought side by side in a desperate stand, lasers and disruptors strobing the forest in violent cascades. Nyla moved among them like living lightning, channeling bursts of the planet's power. Her strikes exploded entire clusters of beasts, yet each time, more advanced. The Alpha shrugged off all direct hits, bellowing with unstoppable fury. Shards of crystal rained down on them, slicing through vegetation and scattering lethal debris. Then the Alpha thrust forward, smashing the barrier. Dozens of smaller beasts poured into the heart of the village, threatening to overrun everything. The defenders fell back, forming a ring around the sanctuary where the elders and the vulnerable had taken shelter. In that dire moment, Nyla sensed the planet's plea. She touched Adrian's hand, and he felt the same electrifying surge they'd shared once before. Together, they linked their energies, forging a bond that magnified the forest's resonance. The statue of the heart of Xyphera blazed, sending a pillar of light into the sky. Luminous vines sprouted from the earth, coiling around the beasts, hampering their movement. Nyla's body glowed with raw power, her eyes shining like white-hot stars. Beside her, Adrian felt a jolt of otherworldly strength flow through him. They raised their hands in unison, focusing a colossal wave of energy that rippled through every tree, every flower, every inch of soil. In a climactic surge, the wave struck the Alpha, tearing through its crystalline armor and fracturing it from within. Howling, the creature collapsed, shattering into countless shards. A chain reaction coursed through the swarm. With their leader gone, the beasts convulsed, uncertain. Then they scattered in all directions, scuttling away into the depths of the forest. The raging tide dissolved. Silence. The statue's brilliance dimmed, returning to soft moonlight. The vines settled, retreating beneath the ground. Slowly, the defenders caught their breath. Everyone, from battered soldiers to exhausted villagers, gazed at Nyla and Adrian with astonishment. Smoke hung in the air. The ground was littered with fractured crystal fragments that glinted eerily. Adrian and Nyla collapsed to their knees, chest heaving. The communal energy receded from their bodies, leaving them aching but alive. Overjoyed villagers rushed forward, embracing them both, cheering their names. Some soldiers, bloodied but triumphant, lifted their weapons in victory. Even the diplomats wore stunned expressions, as though witnessing an impossible miracle. Days passed in the afterglow of victory. Scouts reported no further sightings of the crystal beasts. Indeed, it seemed that with their alpha destroyed, their frenzied aggression might subside for the foreseeable future. A cautious optimism took hold, blossoming into genuine hope. The research team, thoroughly humbled, approached Nyla and Adrian with newfound respect, seeking collaboration on how best to support the villagers' future. Plans were drawn for a minimal-impact alliance, shared knowledge, respectful trade, and above all, the autonomy of Nyla's people to protect their sacred bond with the forest. The diplomats acknowledged that Xyphera's natural wonders went far beyond exploitation, and that any off-world visitors must tread gently on hallowed ground. One morning, as a gentle breeze carried glowing spores through the air, Adrian strolled among the mushroom huts, greeting villagers who hailed him with smiles and bows. He found Nyla by the statue of the heart of Xyphera, arms folded in thought. Even in her newly granted height, she wore a subtle expression of reverence, as if dwarfed by the cosmic forces now a part of her. "Hey," he murmured, stepping beside her. She turned, offering a gentle smile that made his heart skip. "Good morning, Adrian." He took her hand. "We've come a long way since I found you in the forest, trembling and certain I meant to eat you." A soft laugh escaped her lips, recalling the absurdity and the poignancy of that first meeting. Yes, fate had something else in mind. Her smile grew introspective. I used to think we were doomed to hide, that my people were forever at the mercy of bigger beings, never to be heard or seen. But now, she gestured around, to the bustling harmony of her village interacting with the human squad. It's a dream I never dared hope for. He wrapped an arm around her. We did this together. You, me, the villagers, my squad. The heart of Xyphera. All of us. She rested her head on his shoulder. The warmth between them was undeniable, a blend of relief, gratitude, and a depth of affection that bound them tighter than any vow. The possibilities ahead were endless. Journeys across the galaxy, sharing knowledge, or staying here, protecting the precious world where they found love. For the moment, they merely savored the hush of the forest and the soft luminescence that danced along the leaves. Word spread through the galactic assembly about the extraordinary events on Xyphera. Governments pledged to respect the planet's sovereignty. A formal treaty was drafted, ensuring that any future collaboration would center on mutual consent, ecological stewardship, and cultural respect. No large-scale human colonization was planned, only a carefully managed outpost to facilitate gentle exchange. Adrian and Nyla became symbolic ambassadors. Him, the soldier who defended the vulnerable, and her, the champion forever changed by the forest's power. Together, they stood at the intersection of two civilizations, forging hope where once there had been fear. One evening, after assisting with restoration efforts in the far corners of the village, Adrian found Nyla outside, gazing at the vibrant starfield overhead. The forest glowed softly at night, as if in restful contentment. Nyla's silhouette, tall and graceful, was framed by the gently pulsing vines that once sheltered her people in miniature. He approached quietly, sliding an arm around her waist. She leaned against him, letting out a contented sigh. For a long while, they said nothing, simply watching the slow dance of Xyphera's moons. At last, Nyla spoke. "Adrian, I love you," she said, voice trembling with sincerity. "I never imagined saying those words to anyone, let alone a human from a distant star. But my heart is certain." His own heart pounded as he touched her cheek, guiding her face toward his. "Nyla, I love you too. More than words can say." In that moment, every horror of the past, the rampaging beasts, the fear of exploitation, the divide between their worlds, seemed to fade into a twilight memory. Their kiss, soft and lingering, held all the promise and peace of a dawn yet to come. Eventually, they pulled apart, eyes shining. Adrian smiled. "So, will you stay here on Xyphera, or see the galaxy?" She considered the question, glancing at the forest. "My duty is here. My people need their champion, at least for now." She smiled, reaching for his hand. "But that doesn't mean we can't explore together. We'll find a way to balance both." He chuckled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I think that's a cause worth dedicating my life to." A gentle breeze rustled the glowing foliage. It carried the hushed whispers of the forest, a cosmic lullaby that seemed to bless their union. Far in the distance, the faint shimmer of the heart of Xyphera's statue reminded them of the ancient bond that bridged fate and freedom. They had lived through terror, triumphed against impossible odds, and emerged changed, united by love that transcended every boundary of size and species. Against the backdrop of starlight and softly pulsing luminescence, Adrian Wolfe and Nyla, once a tiny alien trembling in fear, shared the quiet certainty that, indeed, fate had chosen a different path for them. In its wisdom, it had opened two hearts, unveiling a power beyond measure, compassion, unity, and a love that would guide two worlds toward a hopeful, harmonious future. They gazed at each other, hands intertwined, with the planet's quiet chorus echoing around them. And in the glowing darkness of Xyphera's endless night, they knew, despite all adversity, they had found a destiny worth cherishing.